swinging it back to Kerry, as you were saying there, like I think I agree with you as well. I think I was watching the Sunday game earlier, and not enough, I don't think, is being said about Kerry this year. Like 3 wins, 4 defeats. I don't think you can no longer say now that they don't. Like, fair enough, they're missing Paul Gainey and Stephen O'Brien. Obviously, Gainey's sort of come back from injury a little bit now, making the odd cameo appearance. But like David Clifford held scoreless from play yesterday as well. Might be a bit of a worry. Like, I don't know what it is about Kerry, but as I was saying to Seamus last week, there's always been a common trend with teams winning an All-Ireland or bridging that gap where there's a bit of a hangover, and that does seem to be the case for Kerry. And you know, like they've a bit of work to do, I think, going into the All-Ireland. I don't think it's. I don't even know if they're still favourites, to be honest with you.
They probably aren't. And one that has mentioned in the comments there that Galway are the bookies' favourites, and probably I believe that Kerry aren't the bookies' favourites, not that Galway necessarily are the bookies' favourites. I would have thought Mayo, maybe even Derry would have crept into that. But when you look at Kerry yesterday, their whole full forward line didn't score for play yesterday. There was only David Clifford with 2 frees. That's not good enough to win a game. And to round my point even more, I've said over the last few weeks, Kerry are nothing without the Cliffords and Sean O'Shea. Other than the Cliffords and Sean O'Shea in the forward line, Kerry scored nothing. That just shows you they're way too reliant on them 3 players to get them scores, and that's going to catch up with them in the next few weeks. And Jason Foley, Tyke Morley, we talked about them being tough, tight defenders last year. They don't seem to be that way in the league. They did in the league last year, where Kerry, I think in the league, they only conceded 1 goal from play last year through Dan McCurry and Killarney. This season, I don't know the exact number though, but they conceded 1 against Galway, they conceded 2 against Mayo. They should have conceded 1 against Roscommon through a penalty. I don't think they conceded any against Armagh. They conceded 1 against Tyrone. So they are conceding in nearly every game, or nearly conceding a goal. So that's going to be a worry for Kerry. In fairness to, like in the McGrath Cup, for example, they conceded 5 against Cork. Against Cork, like that's not a good sign. It really isn't a good sign throughout the league campaign and throughout the McGrath Cup. And I agree with you. It's not being said enough. I think Kerry could very well bomb this year. I think honestly Munster is way too easy for them. I think they'll breeze past that. But my issue would be if they get a tough draw in the qualifiers, they're going to struggle. I think the only saving grace possibly would be the stupid rule that they're second and third going to a preliminary quarterfinal. That could be the saving grace for Kerry. So it remains to be seen what happens in the summer, but I'd be extremely worried about them, both scoring-wise and defensively as well. They're way too open.
They definitely are. Like, they're just, and I suppose some of the fringe players as well, like we've said before, like, and I remember even saying last year, like, I thought Kerry had a really, really good squad outside of Clifford and O'Shea. You know, you had Tony Brosnan, who was a young up-and-coming player, Killian Spillane, Adrian Spillane, Dara Roach, Darren Moynihan. You've got young players like Paul Murphy, sort of coming through or Paul O'Shea, I should say, coming through the ranks. Rory Murphy as well. But for whatever reason, like, those fringe players are just not quite cutting it from a Kerry perspective. Like, I think Donald O'Sullivan's looked all right at different times. You know, he was impressive enough in that win versus Monaghan. But as you were saying, like, outside of Clifford and O'Shea, they're just not getting enough from their forwards. And it's a strange one because it's not like the talent isn't there. The talent definitely is there. But a lot of these fringe players just aren't quite producing. And, you know, they've been given enough opportunities to do so.
And this might be a bold statement coming from me, but I think despite Kerry winning the All-Ireland last year, if you had Kerry's B team against Cork, I think Cork would beat them. You know the fact that like Dublin's B team would beat anybody in Leinster. That's the narrative of everyone in the last few years or so, because they dominated Leinster. But the narrative last year was Kerry would dominate Cork in any shape or form. But I think Kerry's B team, and it shows in the McGrath Cup, and Cork played a bit of a fringe team as well, and Cork absolutely slaughtered them that night in Parky Ring. So I honestly think Kerry are a bit overrated once it comes to depth. Like, we looked at them last year and we thought, okay, they won a few minor titles, they get over the line and stuff like that. But on minor titles, I know the players may seem to be there minor titles, but they haven't won an under-20 title, I think, since about 06, 07. For Kerry, that's not good enough. I don't know what's the reasoning there with Kerry, really. But, it doesn't seem to be there. Like, you look at their play. Thomas Sullivan, in fairness to them, played well. Gavin Moyes is coming back into fitness. But the fringe players don't seem to be stepping up. In fairness to them, like David Moore, I think David Moore is a huge miss in midfield. Like Jack Barry and Barry Dan O'Sullivan, okay, they're finding up players, but I think David Moore really was the glue in that Kerry team. And they're missing him, Paul Ganey and Stephen O'Brien as well. And what will happen if they retire or Clifford gets an injury? What happens then? That's my issue with Kerry. And I think they could even struggle this year. And I think the league was a brilliant opportunity for Kerry to find out who they're up against really and see what they're made of and excel against the top level teams. But they won't get the opportunity to do that again until mid-May. Like that's nearly that's over a month away. So that's going to be big for Kerry in the next few weeks to prepare for that. And they'll be hoping that they'll get a tested Munster. They probably won't. So like I think Kerry are in a pretty bad shape this year, and Jack O'Connor has a lot of work to do. I know he said earlier on that the league doesn't really matter. That's literally what he said. But I just think Kerry could be struggling this season because of we said Kerry's depth was brilliant last year, but I think their lack of depth this year could cost them.
Yeah, Mikey says, I still don't buy this notion of Kerry dwindling, still the number one team in the country. They're not interested in the league this year. I would agree. Like I think they are. They're definitely not interested in the league, and obviously Jack O'Connor has clearly come out and said that. But is that the best preparation? I'm not entirely sure. To be perfectly honest with you, and I think the big difference between the league nowadays compared to a good few years ago is the fact that the championship's right around the corner. Like Kerry are out playing in 2-3 weeks time in the Munster Championship. Now, fair enough, they're not going to get a test against either Tipperary or Waterford, and Cork might ruffle their feathers a little bit at some stage in the Munster Championship. But generally speaking, I think we would all expect Kerry to come through and reach the group stages as provincial winners. But I'm not like I don't know. Like I just think like for some of the fringe players not to be performing, for there to be a lot more defensive issues. I think when they get to Croke Park, they will be a different animal, and you definitely can't rule them out. Like I think they're still going to be thereabouts. Make no mistake. But whether they're still favourites, I'm not sure. And like there just has been a drop in performances, and I just think as well, like we've seen this story so many times with Tyrone last year, Dublin in 2012 when after they won the All Ireland in 2011, Cork the year after they won the All Ireland. Like it happens so much where teams bridge a gap. Even Limerick, Limerick win the All Ireland, in the hurling championship, and then lose it a year later, and then rebuild the year after. So, yeah, I think I'm not sure if Sam is staying in the kingdom this year, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. It was amazing. We were thinking last year that Kerry could dominate in years on end last year because the teams aren't coming up through the ranks and stuff. And Kevin McGorty for the JMAC podcast actually made a very good point earlier on. He thinks that 8 teams could realistically win the All-Ireland this year. And last year we were thinking only Kerry and Dublin, anybody that stops them would be an incredible team. But I genuinely agree with Kevin. Like you look at the contenders this year, I think Galway, Mayo, Tyrone on yesterday's performance were brilliant yesterday. The shooting was absolutely superb. Derry, I think, are up there. Dublin, if they get their players back in order, like Mannion, McCaffrey, all them, I think they're back up there as well. Kerry, you still can't write them out despite their league struggles this season. And then you look at others, maybe there's 6, but then there's 2 other fringe teams, maybe the likes of Armagh, possibly Monaghan, possibly, but maybe Roscommon, so that's about 9. So, like, there's still, like, Kerry still have to beat a lot of teams to get their hands on the Sam Maguire, and I just don't think this team is capable of doing that this season. I haven't seen it in the league, and that's just my opinion. It might bite me in the backside come the end of the year, but just don't think Kerry are motoring along nicely as other counties this season. You look at Derry, you look at Galway, you look at Mayo. That's the benchmark this season, and Kerry aren't reaching that mid benchmark so far. So that's my issue with Kerry, and I agree with you. I don't think Sam Maguire is returning to the kingdom this season.